So it's Winhance Devlog time again, and it's been a while since I posted one of these. The previous video was around 2 weeks ago, and what I was doing in that video was adding the WinGet COM API for faster detection, and then reworking the registry method to detect installed apps. Now, since the recording of that video, in the past 2 weeks, basically, I've completely reworked the Winhance front end by migrating it from WPF to WinUI3. And in this video, I basically just want to go over what's changed and my thought process around migrating from WPF to WinUI3 and all of the stuff that took place as part of that migration. So to get started, you basically get a few different presentation frameworks that you can use for these desktop apps. The one that I was using is the Windows Presentation Foundation, or also called WPF. Then there is WinUI3, which is what I'm using now. And then there's also Avalonia UI. And if you've watched some of these previous devlogs that I've posted on this channel, I mentioned Avalonia UI a lot throughout those videos because at that time, I thought this is what I was going to be migrating to. And then these aren't the only presentation frameworks. You can use others as well, but primarily for a Windows desktop app, this is the most common options that you'll come across. Now, if I just go back to the Windows Presentation Foundation, the WPF that Winhance was using, and I show you some of the examples here, you can see this is what the interface looks like by default. You've got these old looking controls that don't really have nice styling on them. It's just a simple dialog, and you see this throughout Windows today as well for some error boxes and some dialogues that pop up. But the point is that these controls by default don't really have nice styling. Now in .NET 9, there was an update to WPF and they added the Fluent theme. So the Fluent theme delivers the modern Windows 11 aesthetic for WPF apps, and it includes light and dark modes and then system accent color support. And you can see it also has the rounded corners on Windows 11. And this basically looks like WinUI3, but it's not WinUI3. And I could have also migrated to the Fluent theme, but I didn't want to do that because I wanted to replace the entire front end of Winhance with something else. I didn't want to use WPF anymore. And during my research, I was thinking of either WinUI3 or Avalonia UI, but ultimately I chose WinUI3 because that's what Windows desktop apps should be using. That's what Microsoft wants the developers to use when they're developing apps for Windows. Now, Avalonia could have also worked, but the thing about Avalonia, the main selling point of it is that it's cross-platform by design. So you can easily target Windows, macOS, Linux, iOS, Android, WebAssembly, all of that from a single unified .NET code base. So if Winhance was to run on other operating systems as well, then Avalonia would have been the correct choice. But obviously Winhance is just for Windows. It's a Windows enhancement utility. And that's why I ultimately chose WinUI3. And you can see this is basically what Windows looks like, because a lot of these apps that you see in Windows today, like the Task Manager, for example, the Task Manager is built with WinUI3. The new Task Manager, that is. If we open the Settings app on Windows 11, this is all done with WinUI3. And you'll see once I launch the new version of Winhance, it's going to look basically the same as what you can see here, because it also uses WinUI3, which has a standard set of controls and stuff that you can use. Whereas in the WPF version, I had to style a lot of those things myself. Now, the other thing about WinUI3 is you have the WinUI3 gallery. Now, this is a separate app that you can go ahead and download on your computer, and it gives you documentation about every single thing that exists in WinUI3. So you've got fundamentals here, you've got design, you've basically got all of these different sections here that you can go into. So for example, if we take navigation, we've got all these different types that are built into WinUI3 that you can just use. So for example, you've got a navigation view. You can use the navigation view in your code, and WinUI3 already knows how to render it. It already knows it's the buttons here on the left side. And if you click on the hamburger menu, it opens it so you can see each and every single item. And that goes for all of the different controls that you have in the application. For example, the breadcrumb bar, where you can navigate from one section to the other. So for example, in the Windows settings, you might have come across this where if you go into a section, you can click on the button at the top there to go back to the previous section. So I implemented all of these things that I could in the WinUI3 version of Winhance, and I want to show you that now because we're done with the explanation between the different frameworks. But if we go to the releases page here, the previous video that I posted on this channel, we were still using Winhance release number 16. Now, in the meantime, the big update to WinUI3 was Winhance release 17, but at the time of this recording, we're actually already on Winhance release 19, which I posted yesterday. Today is the 19th of February. And if you want to go through the entire changelog, you can do so on the Winhance release page for all of these releases that I published. I'm not going to go over all of that in the video now. I'm basically giving you an explanation of the things that I want to talk about already. But you'll see there are new UI features. I reworked the config import and review system, and I'll show you that as well. I also reworked the backend. So many of the PowerShell wrappers that I was using, where I would call PowerShell to run a command, I've replaced that with native APIs. And in the previous video on this channel, we were working on the WinGet API, so you already know about that. But I also added all of these other native communication methods that makes the application faster. I also implemented accessibility and keyboard navigation, and then made some changes to the licensing, and there was also some bug fixes that I implemented. But to show you the two applications side by side, this is the old WPF version of Winhance, and this is the new WinUI3 version. So this looks more modern, but the layout and stuff is still the same. I'm just going to minimize the WPF version for now. But you can see a lot of the controls that I implemented here, like this info bar that you can see up here for the update that's available. It just looks a lot cleaner than the pop-up that used to appear in the WPF version. If we go over to the optimize section, for example, and we go into one of these sections here, the navigation that you can see up here, this was done with the breadcrumb bar that I showed you earlier. So by default, it looks like this, where it's just text, but I styled it so that it shows the icon as well as a nice border. So it kind of looks like a button that you can click and then also navigate between the different sections. Now, if I navigate between these sections, you'll also see that it's much faster compared to the WPF version if you've used that before. But I can show you an example. This is the WPF version. If I click on the optimize button, it's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds before it displayed this content. Now, some of that also is due to the fact that in the WPF version, all of the settings, all of this content was displayed on one page. And this also slowed down Winhance. And although this is nice to have all of this on one single page, it also actually slowed down Winhance, and it uses more RAM and just more of your computer's processing power to display all of these items. Now, you can use virtualized lists and all of that to basically only render the content that you can see on screen. That is true, and that minimizes some of that stuff. So one of the pros that came out of this refactor is that navigation between these sections are a lot faster than it was in the WPF version. And that's not just related to going from WPF to WinUI3, it's also related to the fact that in the back end, many of the PowerShell wrapper code has been replaced with the native APIs, which are just a lot faster and talk a lot faster with Windows. So Winhance basically communicates a lot faster with Windows than it did before. Now, another part of the application that's a lot faster after the refactor is the startup of Winhance. So if I go to the log files here, the log file that we're looking at now is from the WPF version of Winhance. So if we look at the timestamp there, I started the application 47 minutes past 9, 33 seconds. Then if we go all the way down to where it checked for an update, meaning it basically started up successfully, that finished at 48 minutes and 1 second. So if we take the time, it's basically almost 30 seconds that it took just to start up and show me the main window of the application. And remember, this isn't the first startup. The first startup is going to be a little bit slower because it creates user backup configs and a system restore point and all of that. But under normal circumstances, once you've launched Winhance for the first time, the WPF version usually took about 30 seconds, give or take, to start up. In the new version, the WinUI3 version, if we look at the timestamp here, we started at 48 minutes and 17 seconds. And then if we go down to the entry where it checked for updates, which is right here, that took place on the 25-second mark of 48 minutes. So it's basically less than 10 seconds that it took to start up, which I think is a massive improvement when it comes to the startup and launch of Winhance. Now, some of the other changes includes a config review mode. So now if you import a config, you have an option to choose which config you want to apply. Then you can skip the review and apply it immediately, which basically works the same as the WPF version of Winhance, where you only had this window here where you could select the sections that you want to apply. But as part of this update, if you leave this box unchecked, meaning you don't want to skip the review, you can just select your config file and then click on continue, and it's going to put Winhance in config review mode. And in each of these sections, you'll then have the option to choose if you want the config to make the change. So all of the settings that will be changed if you execute the config, it'll tell you what the current setting is. So it says currently it's on, and we can also see by the toggle that it is on, but the config wants to turn it off. Then you can decide, do you want to apply the change for the config to make this change? Or if you don't want to apply the change that this config is going to make to this specific setting. And then you'll have to do that for every single setting that the config wants to change, because naturally you have to approve every single change. And these numbers that you can see on these info badges here, it basically tells you how many changes there are in each section that you need to review. And once you've done all of that, you can apply the config. And if you just want to exit out, you can cancel that as well. Another thing I added was the technical details. So if you have this toggle enabled, which says toggle technical details, you'll have this banner under each and every setting that shows you the registry path. And then you also have this icon here where if you click on it, it's going to open it in the registry editor and show you where that key is. In the previous version of Winhance, the WPF version, you had to hover over the control and it would then show you the registry path, the value name and all of that. And that was also good to see. It was good info, but I think this is much better where you can actually get to the registry editor as well. And in my opinion, it's just a better and more compact view. And for the users who don't want to see it, they can just toggle it off completely, and then they'll have their settings displayed normally with just the setting name, the icon, the description, and then the toggle whether it's on or off. But like I said, you can go and review the change logs in the releases that I posted on the GitHub releases page for Winhance if you want to see every single change. And also if you go to my main channel, I posted a video about Winhance release number 17 there. It's a 30-minute video, and I basically give a little tutorial about how to use this new version as well as everything that's changed. So the video that you're watching now and the video that I posted on the main channel might be similar, but I am touching on a few other things as well, because this is basically my devlog, the development part of the application, and that's what I want to end this video off with. If we go to the GitHub page for Winhance and we look at the issues, in the past week or so after migrating to WinUI3, the project had over 100 issues. I think it was 110 at one stage. And some of those issues came in with just some of the parts weren't migrated properly. For example, the power options didn't have both controls in one of these versions. So if we go to power, if you're on a laptop, you'll see two sets of controls here, one for on battery and the other one for when you're plugged in, the same way Windows displays it. And that part didn't get migrated as part of the WinUI migration. So there's still a few things to iron out, but some of the stuff that I've been struggling with the most the past month or so with regards to WinGet not working and checking the installation status of these applications and stuff, that's mostly been fixed with a good and proper fix. And that's something I haven't actually mentioned in this video yet. In Winhance release number 18, I replaced the WinGet COM API install and uninstall methods. So it's still being used for the detection purposes, but I replaced it with the bundled WinGet CLI, so the command line tool, to ensure that WinGet is always available. And I added source targeting, meaning whether we're installing from the MS Store source or the WinGet source. Basically what the sentence here is saying is that WinGet will now be always available in Winhance because it's bundled with Winhance. It's a open source application under the MIT license, and you can bundle it with your desktop app with the proper licensing and giving attribution to Microsoft as the authors. So if we look at the Winhance files, which will now be for the WinUI3 version, in one of these folders inside of the installation directory, you're going to find WinGet CLI. And here is a copy of the WinGet executable with all of the critical files that's needed for it to run without WinGet being installed on the user system. So this is like a fallback method. If WinGet is detected on the user system, it'll use the system WinGet by default. And on the latest builds of Windows 11, like 24H2 and 25H2, WinGet is already installed and registered. So on those versions, if WinGet is detected and it's working and it's fully functional, it skips the fallback CLI that I added and it just uses the WinGet that's already installed. But on older versions of Windows like Windows 10, the MSIX package of WinGet is not installed, and on your LTSC versions of Windows, it's also not installed. And that's where this bundled WinGet really comes in very handy, because now we ensure that we always have a way to install and uninstall applications via WinGet, as well as do the installation status checks for the apps that are installed via WinGet. But to end off this video, where I'm going to be going from here and what I'm currently working on is fixing most of these issues. And mostly for now, I'm fixing bugs. Before I implement more features, I really want to get the features that's there already working properly without any issues, so that we can ensure that people who try Winhance and people who use Winhance don't run into the bugs over and over and over again. And then from there on, I can add new features, and I do test these things on my computers. I've got a desktop and I've got a laptop here behind me that I test Winhance on. And before I create these releases and push them out to the public, I do test them on my computers and they work. But you can think for yourself, with 1,000 different hardware configurations out there and Windows versions being different, Windows display languages being different, all of that, only then I get to see all of the bugs that's really present in Winhance. And I appreciate every single one creating a issue, whether it's a feature request, a suggestion, or a bug. I appreciate every single one. For now, I'm just focused on the bugs themselves, because to me, those are the most important issues that need to be resolved first. And that's what I'm working on for now. Most of these things I've been doing in the past few weeks, I haven't recorded at all. That's why I'm basically making this video as a catch-up video, just to kind of say where we were and where we are now. And then probably from next week or so, I'll continue with the regular videos where I was recording the work I was putting in as I was doing it. But yeah, I'm really happy with the WinUI3 version of Winhance. I really think it's better than the WPF version. The development of it, in my opinion, is a lot easier. I feel that when I did the migration to WinUI3, I didn't have as much issues that I had while developing it in WPF, and I hope it continues that way and stays that way as I'm working on this application, because I'm really enjoying it and a lot of people are finding it valuable, and that makes me really happy and really glad. So that's it for now. If you want to know more about this version, or you haven't even watched the new Winhance video for Winhance release 17 on my main channel, I highly encourage you to do so. I'll link to it down in the description of this video as well, because it's going to give you even more information about the current state of Winhance. And for the main channel, most of the upcoming videos are going to be related to Winhance, new Winhance updates, and then also some Windows installation videos that I have planned. You can think for yourself that splitting my attention between creating new properly researched videos for the main channel and then working through all of these issues is just not possible, because one of them is going to suffer or both of them is going to suffer. So for now, just to get my mind clear and to get my things in order, I'm focusing on the issues so that I can get this down to a reasonable amount and get the application in a state where it's bug free, if that's even possible. But at the very least, I just don't want any critical bugs that prevent the application or Windows from working properly. But with all of that being said, thanks so much for checking out this video. If you stayed until the end, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate that. But I'll see all of you guys in the next video, and we'll talk soon.